Over the years, Metal Gear Solid has been bundled and repackaged into neat little collections, nostalgia wrapped in high definition for the fans to relive the magic where it all began. A legacy so rich it demanded to be preserved, but the real question is, which of these collections offered the best overall experience for the price and even the times? That's what I'm here to figure out. So get in the comments and tell me what are your personal highs and lows with these collections, which one gave you the most bang for your buck? Let's start at the beginning. So Metal Gear Solid HD Collection launched in November 2011 for the PS3 and Xbox 360, and then later hit the PS Vita in 2012. It included Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. However, for my Japanese brothers and sisters, you guys got it a little bit different. You had to actually buy Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker separately, and instead, you got a voucher to download the original Metal Gear Solid from the Japanese PlayStation Store.
PlayStation 3, Xbox 360版 Metal Gear Solid HD Edition.
Peace Walker's HD Edition also included a download code for the PSP version. Meanwhile, the Japanese Xbox 360 version handed out Metal Gear Solid themed Xbox Live avatar items. Both MGS2 and MGS3 were given Japanese voiceovers for the HD editions, despite MGS2 being based on the English-voiced Substance version. In a strange way, it's like Japan got its own version of the Master Collection before the term ever existed. Eventually, these HD versions were made available digitally through Xbox Live and the PlayStation Store by August 2012, and even later on Xbox One in 2018. So what did the HD Collection have to offer? Originally, it was said that only MGS2 and Peace Walker would run around at 60 FPS, while MGS3 would be locked to 30 FPS, but that changed. All three games were confirmed to run at 60 FPS across PS3 and Xbox 360. However, some of these statements were over-exaggerated, as Metal Gear Solid 3 would rarely maintain 60 FPS, but just about maintain it, and sometimes drop in between 30 to 40 FPS. But the good news is, with Peace Walker being on the console, we could actually get a solid 60 FPS compared to the PSP version that was capped at 20 to 30. An upgrade at the time that felt massive compared to what we got in 2023, where the Master Collection failed to deliver on that one. At least at the game's launch, but after a few mods and different versions, it runs a bit smoother, but still has its problems. All these titles were upscaled to 720p, giving them a sharper widescreen presentation that finally matched the modern displays. Price-wise, it was fair. US players paid $50, UK players paid around 40 quid. For the Vita version, it was also $40 for the US and 30 quid in the UK. 3 major games remastered for that price was definitely a steal, especially since it was the first time that this marked MGS2 and MGS3, and including Peace Walker, were now officially presented in a proper widescreen high-definition platform. This was a defining era for remasters. Bluepoint Games was firing on all cylinders, with games like Shadow of the Colossus, Ico, God of War, Zone of the Enders that included a Metal Gear Rising demo, and of course the overall HD collections that were round similarly in that era. And around the same time in 2011, the brilliant Fox engine was also announced, setting the stage for Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain's visual revolution. Inside the disc were digital instruction manuals for all 3 games. The MGS3 manual also covered Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2, including the tap code chart from Metal Gear 2. Lines in some codec conversations were re-recorded not to reimagine characters but to update terminology for modern gamepads. Left analog stick became left stick, even though the DualShock 3 used the same terms as the DualShock 2. The changes were made anyway. These edits created noticeable shifts in tone during some conversations. On the PSV Vita specifically, the system's limitations led to unique quirks. Characters would reference the touchscreen, which felt very fitting for the handheld devices. Paramedic tells you to heal Snake using the touchscreen, and the Colonel in MGS2 does something similar. It works, but it feels a bit jarring at times. The X button also became the enter command, matching MGS4 rather than the older circle confirm standard button. Changing the aspect ratio to 16:9 meant some new screens were vertically cropped, and due to less sensitive analog sticks, walled movement, especially in MGS2, became a problem. There was no way to remedy this because of fixed camera angles. And some of the re-recorded lines in Peace Walker just felt completely unnecessary. For example, Big Boss originally says to Chico, "Treasure your memories, Chico," and in the HD version, it's completely different. But the subtitle still shows the original line, but also people have noticed how when the bubble pops up that some of the writing doesn't match the audio dialogue in time.
Mi viejo.
Treasure your memories, Chico. No matter what happens, keep them safe.
Mi viejo.
He's gone, but there's one thing you don't ever leave behind. Your memories. Keep them safe.
And it's not just that. The dialogue tied to the PSP specific instructions was re-recorded to match the console versions. Things like use a second analog stick to move the camera now replace the old lines. So if any of you guys can remember anything particularly different about the dialogue in the HD collection compared to the originals on PS2, please let me know in the comment section down below. That also includes the original Peace Walker on PSP as well. The HD version of Metal Gear Solid 2 had something very similar. For example, codec lines were updated for Xbox 360, changing select to back for instance. And there was some voice consistency issues. Some lines, especially from Colonel Campbell, sound a little different, likely due to age and tone shift in the actor's delivery.
Make sure nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me by codec. The frequency is 140.85. When you want to use the codec, push the select button.
Make sure nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me by codec. The frequency is 140.85. When you want to use the codec, push the back button.
Plus there was cut content. The skateboarding minigame from Substance was sadly removed. And the codec zoom. You can't even zoom into faces during codec conversations on the Vita. And without L3 or R3, you can no longer check the measurements of the female hostages with the directional microphone anymore, so we don't know quite for certain if Jennifer is packing those double Ds.
You're Jennifer. 35.
Stay away from me.
25. 37.
Possible hostile sounded. Sent back up.
And the infamous button mashing sequence on an Arsenal gear was nerfed, making it shorter, easier, especially on harder difficulties. And all this just impacts the health for Solidus' fight, making it less intense. There's a lot of people in the MGS community that complain about this function, especially in MGS1 where you have the button mash. All I can say to you guys is you need to spend more time working on that 5-knuckle shuffle, if you know what I'm saying. There was a few noticeable bugs as well, like grenades delayed their explosion for example compared to the original. Fortune's cutscene sometimes fails to load and her sea lice don't seem to appear.
I can't tell you how happy I am that you were alive after all. I knew this moment would come.
And George Shears is misspelled as George. Then there's the broken shaver mechanic. Now originally you'd find this in the beginning of the plant chapter. If the player manages to find the shaver and gives it to Snake in Strut B, Snake will be clean shaven. And when Raiden finally meets up with Snake in Arsenal gear, will give Snake a similar look to how he appeared from the first game. However, in the HD version, this doesn't work in cutscenes. Only in the codec calls do you actually see Snake without a beard. Not only is this feature broken in the HD version, that defeats the purpose of actually getting the shaver. Not to mention that you need to play it in hard mode to be able to get the shaver to begin with, which shows that Konami pretty much based this version actually on Substance. And they couldn't really fully implement everything that was on Substance from that port. I mean, yeah, there's Snake Tales and VR missions as such, including the casting theatre, which by the way is from the original MGS2 for the European and Japanese version, but it's a shame how they couldn't just fully include everything from that port, including the skateboarding. So anyway, let's continue. The coolant doesn't fog up the mirrors like it did in the original. It's crazy to think that the original for its time had so much detail they couldn't incorporate in the newer versions. And the kernel codex animations are missing. The Ghost Babel MGS1 kernel portraits that should have been there from the PS2 when the AI starts going crazy is no longer there. Plus, in some areas, especially on the deck, it doesn't feel like it rains as much on the HD collection compared to the original version. Plus, the Metal Gear Ray models don't seem to have the correct serial numbers stamped on them, on all the Rays, despite the health bars showing something different. Plus, Metal Gear Solid 2's logo in the opening is much smaller than the original version. And speaking of logos, the words on the wheel locked doors in the big shell now read Metal Gear 2 Guns of the Patriots. I know it's a subtle nod to Metal Gear Solid 4, but it just feels unnecessary being there. And the iconic scene where Snake jumps off the bridge with the stealth camo, when he finally lands, the morphing effect in the HD version is not the same as the PS2. The morphing effect of Snake's busted stealth camo was clearly well best presented in the original version. Plus, there's mirrored textures on the connecting bridge, and walking on the metal plates in strut B creates a weird high-pitched noise. Plus, some of the textures on the bloodstains and the skins of the enemies are broken. The PS2 version has noticeable bullet wounds on some of the Grolukovich guards when they're shot. Pliskin's head, hair, beard and face textures were very simplified in the HD collection compared to the PS2 textures. And there was a spelling mistake, as one of the barrels during the boss fight against Fortune reads Kaishan instead of Caution. And the blood splatter after Solidus has been defeated is also missing. Whilst this doesn't happen usually, there has been reported cases of this actually happening, but by then the digital versions have most likely been updated. So on the PS2 there were no subtitles for the optional Johnny Saska monologue when he's having a dump. When Raiden is inside the hostage room, there were subtitles of this and Johnny of his shenanigans, but the players were actually unable to read the main conversations between Solidus and Ocelot and Olga. This was ineffective, because whilst you was keeping your mind busy on Johnny taking a dump, you couldn't really keep an eye on what the main characters were saying in subtitles. Plus, in the HD collection, pause menus and codecs and other interfaces take a lot longer to load than in the PS2 version.
Snake, switch to the front. What you're wielding.
So now we move on to Metal Gear Solid 3 in the HD collection to try and unravel some of the problems that were already there before the likes of the Master Collection even came out. Apparently there was an alert state change load glitch on the Xbox 360 version where you'd load into the game, and I believe there would be different alert states depending on whenever you loaded. Plus, capturing a milk snake and calling paramedic was meant to show a CQC knife instead of showing the milk snake in the codec calls pictures, which has all been fixed now.
I see you've caught a a milk snake. The milk snake closely resembles the coral snake, but it's actually not venomous. Even so, you'll still take damage if it bites you, so don't get too close.
So is there a way to tell the difference between a milk snake and a coral snake?
It's pretty difficult. They really do look almost exactly alike. I guess if I had to pick something, I'd say it's that the milk snake is much less aggressive.
Okay.
I just thought of a better way. You're going to love this.
What?
Eat it.
I definitely think there's a big difference between a CQC knife and a milk snake, and no, you definitely do not want to eat it, Snake. So anyway, this is something that has been fixed on the Master Collection, and previous before it on the PlayStation 2 and on the extra version on Subsistence, this wasn't an issue. Anyway, let's move on. And one of the noticeable ones was as well is if Snake runs with a lit cigar, the tip will actually duplicate, almost like a ghosting effect. Plus there was really low resolution for the splitter face paint and the outfits, including the infinity and green face paint. Some of the body parts were in low resolution of the character models, and the MiG-21 radar displayed showed the actual radar itself sweeping in the wrong direction in the Operation Snake Eater intro. There was even meant to be a problem with the pause and delay for changing camouflage and the cure menu and etc. compared to before. Smoke and particle effects were also running at double speed, and Sokolov's monocle string doesn't move anymore when Snake meets him. Plus, the Cure and Food video clips start out the proper way but end up horribly pixelated. And the end in the intro cutscene has visual issues as well. Plus, the Fury does things like attacking the wrong way and using his abilities during his hit stun. Also at a higher frame rate, at a much larger amount of fire can persist on the ground, which can be especially seen on Xbox Series X and S since the game runs at the stable 60 FPS, which is tied to the frame rate. Plus, the number in the lower right corner when using the thermal goggles in the FPV is out of frame in the HD collection. The rain is barely visible in the HD collection, which is a common problem that people have reported on, me included, especially during the cutscene when Snake meets the boss on the bridge and a lot more further on into the game. Plus, the Snake Eater song in the beginning is out of sync due to the removal of the noise in the background, the ambience, that normally plays when Konami Entertainment Presents is on screen. There's even reports that suggest that the Pain's Bullet B will not hit Snake in first-person view in the HD collection. And that blue point really is nothing to do with this, but it's a consequence of the game running at 60 FPS, and apparently the same thing will happen on the PS2 version if you emulate it at this particular FPS. I think the thing is that some games are just not optimised to run at a higher frame rate. It's worth noting in the HD edition as well that Eva's face texture has a strange line underneath her neck. It's usually something you can see during the part in the underneath the waterfall section, where she looks like she's dressed up as Tatiana. It's even more noticeable then, specifically. It kind of gives the illusion that she's wearing a mask, similar to when Big Boss is wearing the Rykov mask. And some of you may all remember the beloved Guy Savage minigame nightmare that was actually activated once you saved the game inside a Grozny Grad prison and then come back later on and play it. Basically, it was Naked Snake's vampire-themed nightmare. And basically, this was removed from the HD collection as well, which is terrible. Plus, the Secret Theater and Snake vs. Monkey were also not included, basically eliminating all the banana monkey madness from the PS2 era. Due to this omission, the player cannot unlock the banana camo or the monkey mask. The monkey mask itself, however, can still actually be found though within the game files, so maybe Konami were considering it? But roughly all what I've mentioned in the ladder, especially the Guy Savage minigame, including the Monkey Madness, didn't make it into the likes of the Master Collection, sadly. However, with the later release of Metal Gear Delta this year, it looks like that Monkey Madness will be coming back, so we get to go ape once again. And for you Xbox users, instead of getting Snake vs. Monkey, I think you'll be getting Snake vs. Bomberman, which is equally just as cool. And let's be entirely honest, Konami wouldn't be doing the fans a favour if they didn't include Guy Savage, even if it means remaking that small little minigame once again for us to play, because that in itself, if we don't get it, will be a nightmare. And this also goes for the Secret Theater, which by the way didn't make it into the HD collection, nor the Master Collection. So Konami, if you're listening, please make that comedic brilliance back into Delta. Konami, if you can hear this, just do it.
You disappoint me. I'll get you for this. Prepare to die.
And in the PSP version of Peace Walker, we had something called the Vocaloid, which is basically a singing application developed by Yamaha. A version called Vocaloid Flex that was used in MGS Peace Walker, but it's used for recording lines with preset in Metal Gear Zeke's AI, and you could use it to actually play different music and the AI would sing it back in like a robotic voice. It said it was left out of the HD edition of Peace Walker, presumably due to copyrights, and Net Vocaloid was discontinued, so even if they couldn't use it, I'm sure they could replicate it in some way or another if they were to bring it back in Master Collection 2. That's if they're including Peace Walker in that bundle. I know it's not exactly a big detail, but it's all these small little details in Metal Gear Solid that make the game so unique, and it seems like a waste throwing away all these cool features for the sake of what's easier and convenient rather than spending more time to add these additions into newer enhanced versions. Like Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, that consisted of 3 discs full of amazing additional content. The third disc that includes something called Existence that featured a 3.5 hour cut of Metal Gear Solid 3 cinematics featuring remastered sound. So this was the HD collection. It was a technical triumph in its time, but clearly not without of its flaws. I mean, just check out all the bugs that we just touched upon. Half of these things we didn't even realise were there without actually really paying attention. It's preserved most of the experience and modernised the look slightly and brought the series to a wider audience and helped us play it on a newer platform, but in doing so it trimmed edges, smoothed over texture, and lost some of that raw quirks that made the originals so iconic on the PlayStation 2. And one could say perhaps we could overlook some of the technical limitations and some of the cool features it left behind from the PS2 version and the likes of Substance and Subsistence, because it was a bundle that was the first of its kind, and I think a lot of people were happy just to re-experience it again with a whole new higher HD quality. But looking back in hindsight, Konami really could have done and should have done a lot better to really give the fans what they deserved. And even though the HD collection had its flaws, Bluepoint did a decent job, though personally it may have been better with the team at Konami and Kojima Productions to have remastered this port themselves with a lot more care and love. Even if it meant hiring die-hard fans such as yourself to playtest and to make sure that everything from its humble beginnings was retained. Whilst in areas it may have lost its graphical quality, there's no doubt in other areas it improved on parts the original couldn't, especially certain textures and image quality.
Spread your wings and fly. God be with you.
However, this isn't the first bundle that Konami had released to the wider public. This isn't over yet. Two years after the HD collection, Konami released what many still consider the definitive Metal Gear bundle, the Legacy Collection, in 2013. It included Metal Gear Solid 1, but not in the way that fans hoped. Instead of being physically included on the disc, it was locked behind a digital download code via the PlayStation Store. That's right, only a PlayStation. A major letdown for anyone outside the Sony ecosystem. This edition also featured Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, but they were simply the same ports from the HD collection. No extra enhancements or upgrades. The original MXX versions of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 were still included, as was the VR missions, along with a few extras, motion comic adaptations of Metal Gear Solid comics, and a beautifully crafted 100-page booklet showcasing promotional posters and artwork and brochures that span the history of the series. The version of Metal Gear 1 included was the integral version, but once again, only via PSN download code, and that's where the first major issue rears its head. If you were lucky enough to get this edition brand new upon release, odds are you redeemed these codes. But in 2025, if you're trying to experience this collection through a pre-owned copy, you're out of luck. Metal Gear Solid 1 isn't on the disc, and used codes are, of course, worthless. You'd either need an unopened copy that's sealed, which now goes for questionable prices, or hope someone's out there selling a PSN account with it, which is rare and just unreliable. Konami failed to consider that not everyone has access to modern hardware or digital libraries. They had the chance to make Metal Gear Solid 1 part of the bundle physically for preservation's sake, but didn't. It's a missed opportunity that cuts deep for collectors and fans alike. The bundle also featured Metal Gear Solid digital graphic novel, Metal Gear Solid 2 digital graphic novel, a fully animated retelling of game events, but what truly made this bundle special, what elevated above every other collection, was the inclusion of Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. No bugs, no reported issues, just the full story of Snake told across the generations, and topped off with that epic booklet bursting with artwork from Yoji Shinkawa, a tribute to the legacy itself. Kojima himself clarified in a Twitter message that this collection was meant to include only titles he was directly involved in. That's why games like Metal Gear Solid, The Twin Snakes and Portable Ops were excluded. The only exception, the digital graphic novels included so that newcomers who found all the gameplay archaic could still connect with the stories. Then, on May 2nd, Kojima explained why the Legacy Collection never came to Xbox 360. It all came down to one thing: data size. Metal Gear Solid 4 was too massive for DVD. He stated that releasing it on Xbox 360 would have required up to 7 discs, and the game was simply designed with the Blu-ray format in mind. It was PlayStation exclusive by necessity. And honestly, as far as content goes, this was the best edition to ever be released, a true collector's piece. Its only flaw was platform exclusivity. Truthfully, it was the only one thing that was actually holding it back from utter perfection. Finally, we got the Master Collection released in 2023, for nearly every relevant platform out there today, but most importantly it brought Metal Gear Solid back to PC. Metal Gear Solid's journey on PC has been, at least, quite rocky, and in November 2021 Konami pulled Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty and Metal Gear Solid 3 from digital storefronts like GOG and the PlayStation Store. Why? Well, licensing issues, specifically that inspired the rights for historical footage used in the games, cinematic sequences. Konami promised to bring them back eventually, but no one knew when, and when fans were left in limbo, then came the Master Collection, a long-awaited return. But for many of us it felt more like nostalgia-fueled cash grab than a respectful return. Konami saw the hype surrounding Metal Gear Solid Delta, the remake of MGS3, and tried to ride that wave. What we got instead was frankly a disappointing launch. The release was riddled with issues, some worse than the HD collection. MGS2 and MGS3 were locked at 720p, even though Konami advertised 1080p support. In an age where 4K is now the norm, that alone just felt lazy. There were limited display settings, defaulting to full screen with no options to tweak resolution or play in windowed mode, no mouse and keyboard support, some titles required a controller just to play. And MGS1? That was just the original PlayStation version running under emulation capped at 30 frames per second and without a single enhancement. Even VR missions occasionally displayed Japanese text. It felt rushed, cheap, and worst of all, just too familiar. Because we've been here before with the HD Collection's sloppy execution that should have been perfected way back then. But credit where it's due, Konami eventually cleaned up their mess. Update 2.0 rolled out and added 4K support across PS5, Xbox and PC. Bugs got patched, performance got fixed, and finally it resembled what should have been shipped at launch. On top of that, modders stepped in where Konami didn't at first. They've gone above and beyond, restoring textures, fixing issues that date back to the HD Collection, and even adding new graphical quirks that only fans could have thought of. That alone makes the Master Collection worth playing now. And unlike the Legacy Collection, MGS1 is actually part of the download, not hidden behind a PSN code this time. It includes everything from the integral version, plus a collection of the epic soundtracks and bonus features like the digital graphic novels. Sure, MGS2 and MGS3 are still just ports of the HD versions, but with most of the old bugs patched, they're finally in a playable state again. Looking back, Legacy Collection still wins in terms of sheer value if you ask me. He had Metal Gear Solid 4, the original MSX titles, VR missions, motion comics, and an incredible booklet filled with Yoji Shinkawa's iconic artwork, not to mention the originals. The only flaw is that MGS1 was a digital code and not on a disc, and the entire package was exclusive to the PlayStation 3. If they'd made that available digitally or ported it to other platforms, it would have been undeniably been unbeatable. But let's be real, the Ultimate Edition of Metal Gear Solid is still just a dream. Imagine this, everything from MGS2 Substance, everything from MGS3 Subsistence, MGS4, the epic Shinkawa art booklet, Peace Walker, VR missions, portable ops, as a bonus all bundled with the Master Collection extras like the digital soundtracks and novels. As a fan, I think that's the edition that we all deserved. But hey, Master Collection Volume 2 is clearly on the horizon, and if I had to guess, I think it'll include Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Solid Rising, Revengeance, and either Peace Walker or the Twin Snakes. Maybe Portable Ops shows up again, tucked in alongside one of the titles the way the MSX games were with MGS3, and I think that would be a smart move. But with all of that being said, you guys let me know what you think. What edition nailed it for you, and what do you want to see in Volume 2? Anyway, I'm the VoiceBox, thank you for watching, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
All I want is to be remembered by other people, by history. The Patriots are trying to protect their power, their own interests, by controlling the digital flow of information. I want my memory, my existence to remain. Unlike an intron of history, I will be remembered as an exon.